Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into one of the worst times to be alive and somehow stay that way. Imagine this. You're trudging through a narrow, filth-lined alley in a medieval city. It's late summer. There's a sticky warmth clinging. To your skin, the air is thick with smoke and something else, something sour and almost sweet but wrong. You can't quite name it. A smell like rotting fruit and wet leather drifting from every corner. It's not your imagination. That's the scent of decay. And before we go any further, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You smell it before you see it, before the panic, before the death tolls, before anyone really has a name for it. That's the funny thing about plague. It doesn't arrive with a title card. It slips in sideways, unnoticed, like mold creeping along the baseboards of your life. And the first sign is usually your nose. The medieval city, London, Florence, Prague, doesn't matter, isn't exactly known for its hygiene. Chamber pots are emptied into the street, butchers leave scraps for the rats, and everything clings to everything. Normally, you're used to it. But this is different. There's an animal tang to the air now, like butchered meat and damp wool left out too long in the sun. People start lighting fires, not for warmth, but to cleanse the air. That's the theory anyway. Rich households burn herbs or vinegar, or in desperate cases, rub themselves with onions and rosewater. And if you're lucky, your town has someone with enough coin to hire perfumers to roam the streets, shaking scented pouches like medieval Fabrizi. Historians still argue whether these miasma-based theories helped anything, or just made the stink more complicated. Either way, it gave people the illusion of doing something. When you can't see the killer, smell becomes your sixth sense, your early warning system, your sign to stay inside. If you're a little superstitious, maybe you blame the smell on the stars. After all, weren't Saturn and Mars in opposition last month? Or perhaps you're just practical. You shovel lime into your outhouse pit and pray the rats stop showing up in pairs. But deep down, you know the scent isn't coming from where it used to. You pass a butcher's stall, or rather what used to be a butcher's stall. It's abandoned now, meat still hanging, gray with flies. The cat that used to loiter here is gone. The beggar who sang near the steps? Gone too. But the smell, that stays. Clings to your clothes, your thoughts. Every breath feels like it's brushing past someone else's last. One quirky but real detail. Medieval people didn't just blame smells, they tried to trap them. Scent pomanders made of ambergris, cloves, and wax hang from necks or belts. The wealthier you are, the more elaborate your anti-smell arsenal. Some folks walk around with sponges soaked in vinegar, holding them to their faces like a modern-day gas mask. If you can't escape the plague, you might as well try to filter it through cinnamon, but nothing stops it. And soon the scent isn't just in the streets, it's in the churches where incense has to work overtime. It's in the bakeries which are slowly going silent. It's even in your dreams. You think you hear someone coughing 2 alleys over, and suddenly the air feels heavier, thicker. You hold your breath as if that'll help. Let's pause for a second. Picture yourself sitting in your tiny wooden home, maybe above a shop, maybe on a sloped street where sewage runs in rivulets after rain. You open your window to let in some fresh air, only there isn't any, just smoke. And underneath, the smoke, that now familiar, ever-present smell of death. Not metaphorical death, not poetic death, just literal, slow, human decay. Even animals react. Dogs begin howling at odd hours. Cats go missing. Horses shy from streets they used to. Trot down without hesitation. Whether it's science or superstition, you feel it in your bones. Something is wrong. Something big. Something that doesn't care how nice your shoes are or how often you pray. Oh, and about prayer. You've probably noticed people getting more serious about it. Bells toll more often. Processions pass by with people holding candles, chanting in Latin, begging for mercy. No one says plague outright yet, but you hear phrases like God's punishment or the rot murmured over bread and watered wine. Meanwhile, city officials are scrambling. Fires are lit in the street not just to purify the air, but to create a kind of smoky curtain between neighborhoods. There are orders. Stay indoors. Burn your linens. Don't touch the dead. But they come too late or are too confusing. Some places even try banning certain foods, thinking garlic or butter might be the cause. Spoiler alert, it's not the butter. And then someone down your street dies. They weren't even that sick yesterday. You see a bundle being carried out at dawn, covered in a worn blanket, and suddenly that smell? It's personal. You shut your door and jam a rag under it. It won't help. But it feels like something. You start noticing other things. Fewer birds. More silence. Or worse, more screaming. Doors banging shut. Children crying. And always that smell. One medieval chronicler described it as a sickly sweetness, like flowers left too long in water. Another compared it to rotting hay soaked in rain. But most people just stop talking about it. It becomes part of the background, like the ticking of a clock. You notice it, then forget, then notice again, and wish you hadn't. And it will only get worse from here. You'd think that after weeks of strange smells, vanishing neighbors, and bell-heavy prayer parades, someone would have answers. But no. Nobody knows what's happening. Not really. There's no germ theory in the 1300s, no microscopes. No understanding of bacteria hitching rides on fleas and fleas riding rats. You don't even know the word plague yet, at least not as we do now. What you do know is that something's killing people fast, and the explanations? Let's just say they range from celestial to creatively desperate. Doctors, if you can call them that, show up in strange outfits. You've seen them. Those eerie bird-beak masks stuffed with lavender, mint, and cloves. They're meant to ward off the bad air. The rest of the costume, long leather robes, gloves, boots, makes them look more like bird-shaped butchers than healers. And fun fact? The beaked plague mask didn't become a thing until later centuries, but that creepy image still hovers in your mind as you listen to the neighborhood physician debate whether your cousin's rash was due to Saturn being cranky. Astrology is big, like very big. The leading theory? A misalignment of Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn back in March. That planetary party, they say, stirred up some deadly vapor in the east, and it's slowly drifting westward. Historians still argue whether people actually believe this or if it was just the best-sounding excuse that didn't involve looking down a microscope that hadn't been invented yet. You may also hear whispers about poisoned wells, or a passing comet, or God's wrath. That one's a classic. Some think lepers caused it, others say it was a punishment for vanity. One monk blames it on tight trousers. You personally blame your neighbor's chickens. They've always looked a little suspicious. The medical advice reflects the confusion. One day you're told to avoid bathing because opening your pores makes you vulnerable. The next day, it's garlic and honey poultices all over your body. Or maybe you should smear crushed emeralds on your chest. Too broke for emeralds? No problem. There's a guy selling pigeon blood tinctures down the lane. He also claims to cure warts and baldness. Let's say you go to an actual doctor. He's probably university trained and very proud of it. But that training mostly involves reading Greek texts, especially Galen and Hippocrates, which are more about balancing the four humors than identifying infections. You're told your black bile might be out of whack, or your phlegm is doing suspicious things. Someone offers to bleed you, again, with a knife that doesn't look remotely clean. Meanwhile, your cousin Osric, who barely knows how to spell his name, is now mixing up his own cures using beer, crushed violets, and old superstition. You start to wonder, maybe he's not less qualified than the people in robes. There's a quirky little remedy people swear by. Carry a dead toad in your pocket. Why? Because toads, being earthy creatures, are believed to draw out the poison. Some people even press the toad directly to a bubo, those angry, swollen lymph nodes you really don't want. When the toad dies, which it does, people believe the plague has been pulled out of you. No one seems to notice that the patient usually dies soon after too. To make things weirder, Music is banned in some places. Laughter, too. Authorities fear that joyful activities might anger God, whose divine mood swings are now assumed to be the driving force behind the plague. So even if you're not sick, you're still miserable. You can't dance, you can't bathe, and you're supposed to feel very, very sorry all the time. And yet, underneath all the prayers and public weeping, people are improvising. The smart ones, or maybe just the lucky ones, start noticing patterns. Like, why are all the rats acting strange? Why do port towns get hit first? Why do people who stay inside survive longer? But you can't exactly write a blog post about it. You're not even allowed to suggest that it might not be God's doing, unless you want to be labeled a heretic. At night, your dreams are full of fire and whispering voices. You wake up sweating, unsure if it's the fever starting or just fear. Every sneeze feels like a loaded question. Every cough from your neighbor's house is followed by silence, then the faint sound of sobbing. One physician, if we can call him bold or reckless, declares that the plague isn't airborne at all. He thinks it's transmitted by little animals too small to see. Other doctors laugh at him, but you remember his face just in case. More and more people take matters into their own hands. They smear their doors with pitch, burn sulfur in their fireplaces. One guy even tries to fumigate his house with burning feathers. That one ends badly. But nobody knows what works, so everything is worth a try. There's a deep, gnawing tension in every interaction. You don't want to touch anyone, but you still crave connection. Maybe you stop kissing family goodnight. Maybe you start sleeping with a dagger under your pillow. Not to fight off intruders, but just in case the illness comes for you fast, and you want control over how you go out. You overhear someone say the plague arrived on the silk routes, carried by caravans and ships from far-off lands. That's when a new fear creeps in. Strangers. Merchants are shunned, foreigners stared at, outsiders blamed. A man from Genoa is beaten in the street because his accent smelled wrong. People are scared, and scared people do stupid, cruel things. One city bans hugging, another bans funerals, but the thing is, you can't regulate grief. You still don't know what's killing everyone. But every day, you know a little more about what it takes to live with that not knowing. And right now, you're still breathing. You wake to bells. Again. Not the cheerful kind that tell you someone's getting married or that bread's ready at the bakery. No, these are heavier, slower, the kind rung when someone's being carried out. And you know what that means. Another body. Another house emptied out in silence. Another name you won't say again. By now, the death toll is so constant that people don't really flinch anymore. There's too much dying to mourn it all, so you begin to adjust. Not emotionally, no, that would require time and peace. But practically, your habits shift. Your route to the well now avoids 3 infected houses. You've stopped buying figs from the vendor who used to shout about how ripe and sweet they were, like sin in your mouth. He's either dead or disappeared. Same difference these days. Your city might try to organize a formal response. Emphasis on might. Some towns post guards at the gates and quarantine the sick in their homes. Others draw a red X on doors, a silent warning that reads, "Don't bother knocking, you're next." But let's talk about the real machinery of the moment. The death carts. They rumble through the streets early in the morning or late at night, avoiding busy hours. You hear the wheels before you see them. A kind of creaking thud that sets your teeth on edge. No horses pulling them, usually. Just men, gaunt and hollow-eyed, who've been paid or coerced to collect the corpses. You don't want to look, but you do. Everyone does. It's the not looking that feels unnatural now. Some carts have a man ringing a bell or shouting, "Bring out your dead." No, really. They say that. Historians still argue whether this detail is exaggerated or not. But the phrase survives. For a reason. It captures the daily horror in a neat, awful package. Bodies are tossed in unceremoniously. Sometimes wrapped, sometimes not. Occasionally one moves. That's the thing about the plague. People don't always stay dead right away. You hear stories of folks waking up on the cart, confused and feverish, then dying again later. Or not. No one has time to check. You start thinking in weird units, like 3 cartloads this morning instead of 12 dead. A pile of human beings becomes an event, a chore, a logistical issue, not a tragedy. Your brain can't keep up, so it stops trying. The burial pits are another problem. There are too many dead and not enough grave diggers, or shovels, or land. So mass graves become the norm. Huge trenches dug outside the city walls, often lined with lime to try to prevent the smell. Spoiler, it doesn't work. Some are covered quickly. Others are left open, buzzing with flies, half covered by a storm of linen shrouds and loose hair. You've seen one up close. Or maybe you were just close enough. The sight of it follows you back home, clings to your dreams, a hill of limbs too tangled to count. Someone's rosary still looped around a wrist. Someone else's boot, half off. All human, all gone. Quirky historical note. In some cities, they tried to keep death toll records, like actual ledgers. Neat. Lists of names, ages, and cause of death, often written in the careful Latin of church clerks. Imagine trying to record 10,000 deaths by hand while people are literally dying beside you. The irony? Most of the record keepers didn't survive long enough to finish the lists. The church bells toll more often now. Funeral rites have become a luxury. In some places, the priests just stop showing up. Can you blame them? They're human, too. You hear someone mutter that the holy water is all gone, that someone tried to water it down, that a bishop fled in the night. You start wondering what happens when even faith goes quiet. And then there's the practical stuff. How do you get bread when the baker's dead? How do you haul water when your neighbors won't come outside? The answer: you improvise. Break into the empty bakery. Haul the water yourself. Pray the plague hasn't touched the well. Sometimes the silence is worse than the bells. You walk past entire rows of shuttered homes. No sound, no movement. Just cats darting through alleys and the crows. Not just one or two, but dozens. Watching, from rooftops like they've figured out something you haven't. You joke about it, of course. Maybe they're keeping score. One morning you see a man collapse in the street. Nobody goes to him. They just watch, lips pressed tight, eyes wide. You all freeze in this strange, silent standoff. He twitches once, then stills, and everyone walks on. You begin to notice the odd things. Untouched meals left on windowsills, hastily abandoned shoes, toys lying in the dust. Life interrupted mid-step. The plague doesn't knock. It barges in and ends the sentence halfway through, and then the city starts to empty. Some flee if they're rich, lucky, or delusional. Whole families pack up carts and head for the countryside, hoping the air's cleaner out there. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. Some never make it. Others are turned away from town after town, seen as walking infections. For the rest of you, the ones left behind, it gets quieter, not peaceful. Never that, just quieter. No children shouting in the square. No gossip at the well. Just the occasional cough, the flutter of a curtain, the creak of a cart that isn't stopping at your door. Yet you start to wonder, if everyone's gone, who will ring the next bell? You'd think the worst part is the sickness, but really it's the waiting. You don't get a timetable. No clear warning. The plague doesn't send out messengers. It just slips in, quietly, efficiently, and stays as long as it wants. So, now every little ache, every sore throat or bit of dizziness feels like a prophecy. You start monitoring your body like a paranoid landlord. Is that a bruise or the beginning of a bubo? Is your forehead warm, or are you just anxious again? You touch your armpits more than is socially acceptable. You avoid mirrors, but you still check your tongue and any reflective surface you can find. Looks fine. For now. You become obsessed with symptoms. You learn the signs like they're lines in a play. Fever, chills, vomiting, a weird rash. Then, if you're lucky, the big, terrible swellings. Under the arms, in the groin, along the neck. They're hot, black, and painful enough to make you scream into whatever cloth is handy. These aren't pimples. These are declarations. Your body has betrayed you. There's also a newer, nastier version of the plague going around, the pneumonic kind. Instead of targeting the lymph nodes, it goes straight for the lungs. People die in a matter of days, sometimes hours. They cough up blood. Their breath smells rotten. It spreads faster. You see a man cough once in the street, then drop later that night. He looked fine this morning. Historians still debate which form was more common, bubonic, pneumonic, or septicemic, but in your reality it doesn't matter. They all end the same way. You just hope you get the kind that lets you say goodbye. You know someone who's sick. Everyone does. Maybe it's your aunt, or the boy who sold you turnips, or your best friend's sister who once sang during festivals and wore bells on her shoes. Now she can't even get out of bed and you visit. At first you sit by their side, bring soup, wet cloths, but after a few days you start standing further away. Then you stop going altogether. It's not cold, it's survival. You tell yourself they'd understand. You try to keep busy, sweep the house, boil water, count candles, make little piles of food and herbs like they'll protect you. You start sleeping, in shifts, avoiding crowds, wiping down surfaces with vinegar and rose water. You even consider fasting because someone said it cleanses the spirit. You last 6 hours before gnawing on a stale heel of bread and regretting all your life choices. Every time you pass someone, you hold your breath. You mutter prayers. You feel your heart spike when they sneeze. Was it dust or death? You don't know. They don't know. And it's that uncertainty that eats at you more than anything. The houses with plague inside begin to smell. Different, you can't describe it exactly. But once you know, it clings to the air, to clothing. It's not just decay, it's fear. Wet, moldy, coppery fear. You overhear strange advice in the market. What's left of it anyway? Someone says to carry a posy of herbs in your sleeve and sniff it constantly. Another says to burn juniper branches in your fireplace. Someone else swears by crushed pearls and goat's milk. The desperation has a scent of its own. There's this guy, you don't know his name, but he wears a purple hat, and he says loudly that he has the cure. He sells little cloth packets filled with crushed snakeskin and thistle. Says if you boil it in rainwater and drink it at dawn, you'll be fine. He hasn't gotten sick yet, so maybe he's right. Or maybe he's just lucky. You think about buying one. You don't. One night, you dream of getting sick. Your skin turns black. Your mouth fills with worms. You wake up gasping, only to realize your blanket has twisted around your legs like a snake. You lie there for a long time, listening to your own breath, praying it doesn't turn wet. Sometimes you think about running, just walking away, into the woods, toward the mountains, anywhere the plague isn't. But where is that? People flee one village only to bring the sickness with them to the next. You'd be a walking time bomb. Besides, what would you take? Your spoon? Your spare tunic? Your dog, if he hasn't gone feral yet? At least once a day, you do a full body scan. You scratch at your skin. You prod your armpits like you're trying to find a secret message. You convince yourself your throat feels sore, even when it doesn't. You check your tongue again. Still pink, still fine. You become superstitious, more than before. You tie ribbons to your windows. You hang rosemary bundles from door frames. You chant Latin phrases even though you don't speak Latin. You whisper apologies to God for every bad thing you've ever done, including that time you stole cheese from a sleeping monk. But here's the truly unbearable part. Not knowing if it's already inside you. The incubation period is a guessing game. Days, sometimes a week. You could be carrying it right now, smiling politely at your neighbors, completely unaware that your body is already shutting down. You wonder if you should isolate yourself, lock the door, just in case. But then who would feed the animals? Who would light the fire? What if the sickness never comes and you just die from loneliness? You bargain with the sky, with the saints, with that weird wooden idol someone buried behind your shed. You say, if I survive this, I'll be good forever. Then you immediately break that promise by thinking unkind thoughts about your brother-in-law's singing. Let's say, just for fun, you survive the plague. I mean, statistically, that's not likely, but you're a main character now, so you pull through. The fever breaks, the swellings don't burst in horrifying ways, and you wake up one morning, alive. Congratulations. You've made it through one of the deadliest experiences in human history. Now what? Well, first of all, everyone you know assumes you're still contagious. They avoid you like, well, the plague. You try to go back to the market and people edge away, pulling their sleeves up over their noses. Even your neighbor, the one who once borrowed your comb and didn't return it, won't meet your eyes. Survival has turned you radioactive. Historians still argue whether plague survivors were actually immune or just very, very lucky. Immunity might come with antibodies, or maybe divine favor, or perhaps your body was just too weird for the plague to understand. But to the average 14th century citizen, you look suspicious. You must have done something unnatural to survive. Made a deal, sipped some strange potion, slept with the wrong spirit. The plague was supposed to kill everyone. So what exactly are you? You try to clean yourself, wash your clothes, scrub your walls with vinegar. But the stink of sickness doesn't really leave. It's in your hair, your bed straw, your fingernails. You keep catching whiffs of it when you turn your head too quickly. You burn everything you can afford to lose. Bedding, rugs, old tunics. You even set fire to a wooden spoon just in case. Your house smells like smoke and anxiety. Let's not forget that in some towns, survivors were taken in for questioning, or worse, banished. Some cities tried to purge the tainted by forcing them into isolation or shipping them off to plague islands. Because nothing says thanks for not dying like a one-way trip to Goat Island. Food is still scarce. Your local miller is either dead or out of grain. You try to eat sparingly, thin porridge, yesterday's bread, some beans if you're lucky. You dream of meat, but even rats have gotten hard to catch. You might attempt to find work again, but with half the population gone, the economy is, let's call it, weird. On the upside, there's suddenly plenty of job openings. On the downside, who's paying you? The lord of the manor? He died. The merchant guild? Disbanded. You might actually be in higher demand now, but you still have to convince people you're not cursed. Quirky historical tidbit. In England, after the Black Death, laborers demanded higher wages because there were fewer of them. Bold move, and it worked. For a while. Then the elites panicked and passed the Ordinance of Laborers, trying to freeze wages at pre-plague levels. Nice try. You're tired, all the time. Not just in your bones, but in your soul. You've spent weeks tiptoeing around death, and now that it's past, you don't quite know how to function. Things you used to enjoy, music, bread making, yelling at your cousin, feel hollow. You've survived, but you're not living. Not yet. There's also the guilt. Survivor's guilt isn't a modern invention. You find yourself looking at the empty house next door and thinking, why me? You remember the face of the girl who taught you how to carve spoons and wonder if she died alone. You think about the priest who gave you his last slice of cheese and then vanished. You wonder if your survival came at someone else's cost. People have started whispering about strange things. Ghosts, visions. A headless nun who walks the alleys at dusk. A boy who sings to rats. Some say the plague has changed the world's balance, like something deep and invisible shifted and we're all still wobbling from it. Some survivors get weird. They start preaching, screaming in the marketplace, flagellating themselves in public until the guards drag them away. One man paints his face with ash and only speaks in bird noises now. You avoid eye contact. There are theories. So many theories. Some say it was a punishment from God. Others claim it was caused by bad air or planetary misalignment, or the corruption of souls. A few blame travelers or merchants or even, bizarrely, cats. Some towns begin rounding up animals, convinced they're spreading the illness. Irony alert. Killing cats actually made the rat population worse. You start going through your belongings, trying to remember who gave you what. That cup, wasn't it a wedding gift? That chair, wasn't it built by your cousin? So many objects, now untethered from the people who once made them matter. You think about leaving, starting over somewhere else, but where? Every town has its own scars. Every road is heavy with refugees and memories. You might visit the church again, just to sit, just to think. The sermons are quieter now. Fewer people, fewer answers. You stare at the stained glass and wonder if the saints are tired of listening. You light a candle, though, just in case. Then one day, It rains. Hard. Thunder and all. And for the first time in weeks, the air smells clean. You step outside, let it hit your skin. You look around and see others doing the same. Tentative, wide-eyed as if they've forgotten how weather works. You're still here. Somehow. Your hands are trembling, your hair is thinner. But you're alive. And the world, what's left of it, will have to make room for you again. So, you've survived the plague, dodged suspicion, and managed not to starve so far. You'd think you'd get a reward, a feast, a parade, maybe a warm bath that doesn't smell like boiled onions and despair. Instead, you get to clean up, and cleaning up in a medieval world post-plague? It's not just sweeping and scrubbing, it's something darker. Because when half, sometimes more, of your community dies, someone has to deal with the bodies. And guess what? That someone might be you. You don't volunteer, no one does. But the job still has to be done, and you're here and you still have legs. That's qualification enough. It starts small. A neighbor's cottage smells off. You peek through the cracked shutters. Sure enough, she's gone. Curled up like she just fell asleep mid-prayer. You find a cart. A rope. You roll her up in her sheet because there's no one to sew her a proper shroud. You tell yourself you're helping, but then it happens again and again. And soon you're hauling bodies every other day. People you knew, people you didn't. They blur together. The local graveyard is full. Overflowing, actually. Graves are shallow now. Markers are crude. Crosses made of firewood. Names scratched into bark. You start burying 2 or 3 people in the same hole. You whisper something over each one, just to feel like someone saw them off. Quirky fact. In some cities, like Florence and Avignon, they had to dig mass trenches, deep, enough to layer bodies like lasagna. They poured lime over each layer to tamp the stench and slow decay. It didn't really work. You smell it anyway, and let's talk about the smell. It's everywhere. Not just in graveyards, but in alleys, on staircases, in wells. The scent of rot clings to your clothes, your hands, your breath. You scrub with vinegar, rosemary, even ashes, but it lingers. You wonder if you'll ever smell clean again. There are those who profit from this moment. The corpse collectors, the makeshift undertakers. They wear masks sometimes, not the beaked plague doctor kind. Those come later in fashion. But scarves soaked in herbs, they charge steep fees. Want your grandmother buried properly? That'll cost extra. Historians still debate whether these early body handlers helped slow the spread, or worsened it by moving infected remains through crowded towns. Either way, someone had to do it. You start seeing things. Little movements. In the corner of your eye. A shape near the well that wasn't there a second ago. You stop trusting shadows. You flinch at night noises. Your dreams get worse. The dead visit. They stand beside your bed. They ask why you survived and they didn't. They don't sound angry, just curious. One night while digging, you find something strange. Not a body, well, yes, a body, obviously. But in her hand, she's clutching a small wooden figurine. It's smooth, worn, carved into the shape of a bird. You don't know what it means, but you pocket it. Later, you keep it under your pillow. You don't ask why. You develop a new routine. Wake up, check yourself for buboes, still none. Eat a crust of something. Burn incense if you have it. Then walk through the lanes looking for the fallen. A neighbor gives you a bell to ring so people can hear you coming. They call you the Midnight Crow. You try not to take offense. Every once in a while, someone begs you to wait. Don't take him yet, they say. He's still warm. And you do wait. You sit. You let the silence pass between you. Sometimes the person dies anyway. Sometimes, miraculously, they don't. You feel oddly proud when that happens, like you've won a bet you didn't place. There's one house at the edge of town, the one with the red cloth tied to the door. You've walked past it a dozen times. Today you hear something inside, a cough, a shuffle. You knock. No answer. You push the door open and step in. It's dark, stuffy. Smells of damp wool and sour apples. You see a figure hunched near the hearth, too still. Then, from the shadows, a voice. Don't take her. It's a boy. 9, maybe 10. Dirty face. Fierce eyes. He's guarding the body of his sister like a knight guards a queen. You stand there, unsure. You don't want to be the villain in his story. So you leave. Come back the next day, and the next. On the third day, both of them are gone. You dig 2 spots side by side. You don't cry, but your hands shake. You find yourself collecting odd tokens. Bits of ribbon, a thimble, a button shaped like a dog. Things left behind by the dead. You don't know why. Maybe it's proof they existed, that you didn't just imagine all of them. Some say this work is holy, that you're doing what priests used to do. You're not so sure. You don't feel holy. You feel haunted. Your hands are cracked. Your stomach always aches. But you keep showing up. One day a woman gives you bread, fresh, still warm. She says thank you. That's it. Just thank you. And you almost cry, because you didn't realize how long it's been since someone saw you as human. So you eat the bread. Slowly, carefully. You savor every bite. Then you pick up your shovel and walk back toward the graveyard. You'd think after burying half the village things might calm down. That maybe the worst has passed, but that's not how the plague works. Now comes a different kind of suffering. The quiet, stretched out kind. The kind where nothing happens, quickly, but everything still hurts. The town is eerily silent. Bells don't ring as often. No bakers calling out prices. No children shrieking in the alleys. Even the chickens are quieter. It's like the world's holding its breath, waiting to see if death's really done with you. You try to get back to normal life, but what does that even mean now? Your shoes are worn through. Your hands always smell faintly of vinegar and damp dirt. And your sense of time? Totally wrecked. Days blur together like watercolors in the rain. The routines you once knew, harvest festivals, Sunday sermons, market days, have either disappeared or returned in strange, limp versions of themselves. No music, no dancing, no roasted goose. Just a few people pretending this is fine. And the emptiness? It's physical. You walk down the lane, and every third house is boarded up or crumbling. You know who used to live there. You even remember how their windows smelled of mint or how they used to sing while stirring soup. But now it's just echoes. Historians still argue whether survivors experienced a sort of post-traumatic shock or something more spiritual, a communal crisis of faith. Either way, the vibe is off. You start noticing the small details that grief has made grotesque, like the way abandoned toys still sit outside doorways covered in dust, or the bits of cloth tied to doors, symbols meant to warn or to ward now just fluttering uselessly in the wind. Then comes the paperwork. Oh yes, even in plague times there's admin. Maybe you're a tenant on a noble's land. Well, guess what? That noble is probably dead. And the steward? Also dead. So now no one's sure if you still owe rent, which sounds great, until the dead lord's distant cousin arrives and says, actually he owns all this now and you owe him a goat. Or 2. You argue. Politely, at first. Then with more vinegar. It doesn't matter. There are new lords now, new rules. The power vacuum means people are scrambling for control, and it's every peasant for themselves. Meanwhile, you try to gather food, but fields have gone unplowed. Tools are rusting. The cows, not milked. You find one just standing there, mournfully mooing into the breeze. You try bartering. A candle for a heel of bread, a belt buckle for a turnip. You learn to live small, humble. No waste. Every crumb counts. You chew slower now, savor more. Let's not forget the gossip. In a world where information spreads slower than a sleepy donkey, rumors carry weight. Some say a second wave is coming, others say it never left. Someone in the next village dropped dead after sneezing, and now they've locked the gates. You start looking at every cough with suspicion. Someone clears their throat and everyone subtly edges away. You rub garlic on your doorposts. You burn sage if you can find it. You even consider hanging a charm made from animal bones, just to be safe. Quirky historical note. Some survivors believed sweet-smelling objects protected you, so people filled pomanders, tiny metal orbs, with spices, herbs, even ambergris. Yep, that's whale vomit. Better to reek of cinnamon and ocean gunk than risk another round of plague. Sometimes, you just sit and stare at the wall. Hours pass. You're not sure what you were thinking about. Everything and nothing. Grief has hollowed you out like a gourd. One evening, a group of travelers comes through. Pilgrims, they say, heading to a shrine up north. One of them wears a scallop shell. Another hums quietly as they walk. You invite them to sit. They share dried figs and a strange story about a monk who claims to have slept through the entire plague. You're half convinced he never existed, but the laughter feels good in your chest. You ask if you can walk with them a while. Just a few miles. You crave new scenery, something beyond the same hedgerows and muddy ruts. They agree. On the road, you pass fields of tall grass swaying like ocean waves. You see a deer in the distance. You step around puddles and imagine they're portals to other worlds. Your feet ache, but your heart feels lighter. When you part ways, they gift you a scrap of parchment. It says nothing profound. Just, we remember you. You keep it in your tunic. You touch it sometimes, especially when the world starts to feel like a dream again. Back in town, someone starts planting again. Just a few rows of beans. But it's a start. You help. You press seeds into the soil like wishes. You water them, with more hope than actual water. Somewhere nearby, a woman begins singing, softly. A lullaby. No one asks her to stop. And maybe, just maybe, normal isn't the goal anymore. Maybe survival comes with reimagining what life can be. Smaller, yes. Quieter, but not empty. Your hands remember how to plant things before your heart does. After months of pulling bodies from beds and digging endless graves, it feels almost wrong to kneel down and coax life from the earth again. But you do it anyway. You press your thumb into the soil, drop a bean in and pat it shut like tucking in a baby. Someone gives you onion bulbs, another finds barley seed tucked away in a shuttered monastery. And one day a man you thought had vanished shows up with a donkey cart full of compost. No one asks what's in it. This new life is quieter, less urgent. But don't mistake it for peace. There's a kind of tension in survival, a waiting, a holding in of breath. Every cough feels like the first note in a familiar, dreadful song. Still, the garden grows. You learn when to water, when not to. You watch the sky. You listen to the wind. You even talk to your plants. And they don't seem to mind. They listen, better than people, honestly. Historians still argue whether this sudden wave of small-scale gardening after the Black Death came from necessity or from something deeper, an instinct to rebuild, to create where so much had been destroyed. Meanwhile, the town slowly knits itself back together. Someone starts baking bread again. The crust is too hard, but no one complains. A weaver sets up a little stall near the old church wall, now leaning slightly to the left, like it's had too much to drink. There's even a wedding, if you can believe it. You're not sure if it's bravery or denial, maybe both. But one afternoon, people gather. A young couple, barely older than children, stand in their best scraps. She wears a crown of dried lavender. He's shaking so hard he nearly drops the ring. But when they kiss, everyone claps. Even you, and you're not a clapper. Still, you don't stay long. Crowds make you uneasy now, too many faces. Too many chances to start that cycle all over again. You go back to your plot. The onions are sprouting green now. You didn't think they would. Quirky fact. In parts of northern Europe, post-plague survivors believed planting leeks and onions offered protection, not just nourishment but literal spiritual defense. Some even tied the plants into knots and hung them above their doors. You're tempted. Not everything bounces back so neatly, of course. The local tavern has reopened, but the ale's watered down and the laughter sounds forced. Still, it's something. You stop in once a week, sit in your usual corner, drink slow, Listen, the stories people tell now, they're different, more intimate. A woman swears she saw her husband's ghost trimming the hedges. A boy found a gold coin buried under his bed and is convinced it came from the Virgin Mary herself. One man claims the rats talk to him. You just nod. Who are you to say what's real anymore? And dreams, those haven't stopped. Some nights you dream of hands reaching out from the garden, gently pulling you under the soil. Not violently, almost like an embrace. You wake up calm, strangely. Other nights it's the wedding couple, standing in the graveyard holding wilted flowers. You keep those dreams to yourself. Work becomes your anchor. Fixing tools, mending fences, bartering small trades. You patch a neighbor's roof. In return, she gives you a pot of soup and a comb made from bone. You don't need the comb, but it feels oddly ceremonial. You keep it near the bird carving. You even start writing again. Not much. Just small notes, journal scraps. The sky was yellow. Today. Fewer birds than usual. Must plant more beans. It's not poetry, but it's yours. You begin to notice the new patterns forming. There's a group of children who play near the fountain now running again. They skip and shout and invent songs that make absolutely no sense. You find yourself smiling as you pass. Them. One of them waves. You wave back. You don't know her name, but that doesn't seem to matter. And here's something odd. You've started measuring days not by dates or market schedules, but by the life around you. The day the bees returned. The day you found an egg in the chicken coop. The day it rained so softly it felt like silk. The world is changing again. Slower than before, but not stagnant. Historians still puzzle over how long it truly took for communities to recover after the plague. Was it months, years, generations? Some argue we never fully did. That part of our collective psyche always carries that shadow. You feel that. The before times live in your bones, sure. But something new is forming too. One evening, as the sun sets in that apricot-orange way it sometimes does, you sit in your garden and watch your breath cloud in the cooling air. You hear someone singing in the distance. Off-key, yes, but bold. You lean back against the tree stump you've claimed as a seat, close your eyes, and for the first time in what feels like forever, you feel something close to peace, not safety, not certainty, but a tiny spark of something soft, something that hums in your chest instead of screaming in your ears. You hold on to that. Tomorrow will bring something new. Maybe another seedling. Maybe a storm. But tonight you're here, breathing, listening, still growing. There's something oddly satisfying about sharpening a scythe. The metallic rasp, the gentle repetition. The feel of the tool becoming itself again. Useful, lean, dangerous in the right way. You never thought you'd find peace in a blade, but here you are, preparing for the harvest. Yes, there's a harvest this year. It's smaller than before. Fewer hands to gather it, fewer mouths to feed. But the barley is tall, the onions fat, and the cabbages, well, they've taken over one entire corner of the field like leafy, stubborn squatters. You and a few others work side by side. Not talking much, just moving in rhythm. Cut, gather, bundle. You sweat through your tunic. Your back aches, but you welcome the soreness. It feels earned. You stop now and then to swat at flies or sip watered-down beer from a leather flask. You notice your neighbors more closely than before, who sings to themselves, who has started smiling again. Everyone's still scarred, but there's less fear now, less flinching. Here's a curious detail. After the plague, wages rose sharply in many regions. Fewer workers meant more bargaining power. Serfs walked away from their lords. Some villages even negotiated better conditions. Imagine that, peasants with leverage. You'd almost laugh if your ribs didn't still hurt from coughing last winter. You're not quite sure how it happened, but you're working for yourself now. The land was abandoned. You took it over. No one's come to claim it back. Maybe they won't. Maybe the record's burned. Maybe the noble heir is dead, or a monk now, or just too scared to leave the city. So you keep planting. And the town? It's beginning to fill in again. New families arrive. Stragglers. Survivors from elsewhere. Some are quiet. Some are loud and pushy. One man speaks a dialect you barely understand but points a lot and grins like a lunatic, so you decide to like him. The blacksmith has reopened, though she mostly fixes cookware now. Horses are rare, carts even more so. But you manage with what you've got. You carry bundles on your back, you walk more. Your feet have toughened. A traveling friar shows up with a sack of mismatched candles and a face full of freckles. He preaches kindness, then asks if anyone has cheese. You give him a slice, and he blesses your cat. You didn't even know the cat was religious. Quirky side note. Many believed cats had protected people during the plague, especially in regions where they hunted rats and kept the flea population down. Ironically, cats were also blamed and killed in other areas, which predictably made things worse. Your cat seems smug about this historical footnote. You've taken to keeping a sort of shrine in the corner of your garden. Not to a saint. Exactly. Just a gathering of things that feel important. A chipped bowl from your mother, a feather you found the day your fever broke, a dried sprig of rosemary tied with string. You sit beside it when the sun sets, sipping broth and watching. The shadows grow long. Some nights you talk to it. You don't expect answers, but the silence feels companionable. There's a funeral one afternoon. Not plague-related, just life. An old man who outlasted the worst of it. His daughters sing while the grave is dug. They pass around honey cakes after, and you eat too many. You regret nothing. You begin to notice how many things return, not as they were, but reshaped. A new herbalist has taken over the apothecary. She uses recipes no one's heard of, including one that involves soaking nettles in beer. It smells terrible and might be magic. Kids now play a game involving chasing each other with garlic knots tied to sticks. It makes no sense, you love it. There's still fear, yes. Still shadows in doorways and coughs that silence a room. But the fear is folded now, layered into everything, like smoke in old fabric. Present, but no longer the whole story. Historians still debate how deeply the Black Death rewired medieval European society. Was it a catalyst for the Renaissance? A death knell for feudalism? A spiritual reckoning? Or just an unimaginable trauma papered over by time and soup? You're not a scholar. You're just a gardener with rough hands and a deep appreciation for dry socks. Still, you sense the shift. You dream of rebuilding the well, of teaching the young boy who shadows you how to sharpen tools, of writing down everything you've seen. Not for history, but for memory, so it doesn't all drift away like the smoke from your neighbor's chimney. One morning you wake to birdsong. That's not unusual, but today it feels brighter. Not louder exactly, just more present. You stretch, you scratch your chin, you step outside and look at the sky, and for the first time in a very long while you don't brace for something awful. You begin to wonder what kind of world is being born from all this ash. It's not just the crops and cobbled streets that are shifting. It's something deeper, something in the way people speak, hold themselves, choose their silences. The world, before the plague, is still there, just beneath the surface like a faint echo. But it doesn't quite fit anymore, and neither do you. You've changed, though it's the kind of change you don't notice until someone else points it out. You don't flinch at thunder anymore, your neighbor says casually one afternoon, and it's true, you hadn't even realized. You think about time differently now, not in seasons or feast days or rent deadlines. You mark it by moments that feel real, like the day the first post-plague festival takes place. It's a modest affair. No parades, no fire jugglers, and absolutely no kissing of strangers. You've all had quite enough of shared fluids, thank you. But someone strings ribbons between two leaning poplar trees. A fiddler shows up with a 3-string instrument and a beard full of crumbs. Someone bakes a cake that leans alarmingly, but tastes like honey and clove. You go, mostly out of curiosity. You sit at the edge of the crowd near the cider barrel and watch people pretend to remember how to dance. A girl spins until she falls down. A man attempts a cartwheel and regrets it immediately. It's awkward and beautiful. Historians still argue whether post-plague festivities were acts of resilience or denial, attempts to reclaim joy or simply to drown out the silence. You suspect it's both. Humans are excellent at holding contradictions. Just look at you, both healed and not, smiling and still flinching at shadows. Later, someone tells a story by firelight. It's not a grand tale, just a small, strange thing about a fox that once lived in the bell tower. The fox apparently rang the bells every Sunday for 6 weeks, until the priest caught it and named it Gregory. No one knows if it's true, but everyone laughs, and that's what matters. You start contributing your own stories. Slowly. The ones you'd tucked away during the plague, unsure if they mattered. About the goat that learned to open pantry doors. About the time you mistook a hedgehog for a ghost. They're not impressive tales, but they make people chuckle. That's something. Quirky tidbit. In some parts of Europe, storytellers after the plague became prized, sometimes paid in eggs, ale, or scraps of cloth, to bring back levity and imagination. In some towns, children were even taught plague parables with dancing skeletons and grim riddles to help them process grief through laughter. You wouldn't call yourself a storyteller exactly, but you've found your rhythm. There's a boy who follows you around now. He must be about 8. His name is Thomas, and he's got the energy of 5 geese trapped in a flour sack. He wants to learn everything: how to mend boots, how to gut a fish, how to make cabbage soup that doesn't taste like despair. You teach him what you know. In return, he teaches you the songs kids sing now. Most are about nonsense: garlic kings and invisible dogs and something called the cheese prophecy. But one catches your ear. It's about a lonely tower and a voice that hums from inside. No one's climbed it, the song goes, because everyone's too scared to hear what the voice might say. It gets stuck in your head. The melody is simple, haunting. You hum it while you plant your winter rye. You hum it while brushing ash from the hearth. You even hum it in your sleep if Thomas is to be believed. One day, you catch yourself smiling for no reason. You're just walking down the path between your garden and the market square, passing the crooked fence you've been meaning to fix, when the smile appears. Like a hiccup. Sudden, uninvited, genuine. You stop walking and just stand there, hand on your hip, confused by your own face. It fades eventually, but the warmth stays. You still have bad days. Days when you feel the weight of memory like wet wool on your shoulders. Days when you avoid the market because someone's voice sounds too much like someone you lost. Days when even soup feels like too much effort. But those days are fewer now, and when they come, you let them. You lie in bed. You listen to rain. You let the cat hog the blanket. And then when you're ready, you get up again. That's the closest thing to a miracle you've ever known. Historians often frame recovery from the plague in terms of numbers: population loss, land redistribution, economic flux. But you know better. Recovery isn't a statistic. It's waking up and planting garlic. It's finding joy in soup. It's waving to a child who doesn't know what the plague was and never will. You think about that sometimes. How memory fades. Will Thomas remember this time? Will he tell his children? Will they believe him? Maybe. Maybe not. But you were here. You bore witness. You grew a garden from dust. And that matters, even if no one writes it down. One day, a trader arrives in town with a strange object tucked into his cart. A mirror. A real mirror. Not polished bronze or burnished tin, but true glass, backed with silver leaf, framed in carved ashwood. It's small, slightly warped, but it reflects the world with a clarity that feels almost accusatory. You see your own face for the first time in years. It's unexpected. Your skin is rougher than you remember. There's a streak of gray in your hair that wasn't there before. Or maybe it was, and you never noticed. Your eyes look tired, yes, but alert, like they're watching for something. You lean in, frown, smile, grimace. You make a face that might scare off chickens. And then, for no particular reason, you laugh. The trader, seeing your reaction, offers to let others look for a few coins. Some do, some don't. An older woman throws a handful of dried mint instead, and mutters something about vanity. The children, of course, crowd around like flies to honey. Thomas says he thought you'd look taller. You try not to be offended. The mirror is a luxury, a sign of a shifting world. Post-plague Europe is beginning to see new imports, new wealth, and new curiosities. Historians sometimes call this period the hinge of the late Middle Ages, a moment where doors quietly swing open toward the early modern world. You don't think in centuries. You think in weather patterns and how many turnips you have left in the cellar. But you sense something loosening. People are moving again. Some return to old lands, some stake claims on new ones. Word comes that cities are slowly reopening. There's talk of Florence, of Avignon, of ships in harbors again. A monk arrives with a bundle of hand-copied texts, plague sermons, healing charms, a few bawdy poems slipped in for balance. You trade 2 chickens for one of the poems. It's terrible and delightful. Quirky tidbit. After the Black Death, there was a boom in the copying and creation of texts, both sacred and secular. One popular genre, danse macabre illustrations, where skeletons cavort with kings and milkmaids alike. Equal parts creepy and cozy. You decide to try your hand at writing, not fancy poetry, just simple notes, recipes, herbal mixtures that helped, and ones that absolutely didn't. The names of those who lived, and those who didn't. You tuck the pages into a box under your bed, beside your best spoon and the letter you never sent. You begin to dream again, not the fever dreams of the plague, but quiet, slow-moving ones. Dreams about rebuilding the orchard, about painting the shutters green, about buying a pig named Bartholomew. You wonder if others are dreaming too. The old church, once boarded up, is now open again. Not for sermons exactly, but for gatherings. A place to sit when it rains. A place to exchange seeds. Someone pins up a drawing of a rooster with antlers. No explanation. You add a doodle of a fish with legs. And then, of all things, there's a wedding. It's between the apothecary and the carpenter's widow. You didn't know they even spoke. But one morning, there they are, standing beneath a garland of wildflowers, holding hands like they invented the concept. The whole town gathers. Someone brings wine, someone else brings a goat which tries to eat the wine. You dance. Badly. But you dance. And for a moment, as the sun sets and someone starts playing that 3-string fiddle again, you forget the sound of coughing, the smell of illness, the way the world tilted back then. Historians still debate whether joy after plague was a kind of rebellion or just a return to what was always human. You think it's both. There's defiance in laughter, there's power in not crumbling. Later, as you wash your hands in the stream, you see your reflection again, this time in the water. It ripples, distorts, but it's still you. And behind, Hugh Thomas is singing the Foxbell song again, off-key, joyful, loud enough to scare away crows. You let him. You think, maybe you've survived more than the plague. Maybe you've survived yourself. The seasons are more noticeable now. You don't know if they've changed or if you've just started paying better attention. Spring smells sharper. Summer heat wraps around your limbs like wool soaked in sunlight. Even autumn, always your favorite, feels fuller somehow, like the earth is taking a long, smoky breath. And winter, well, winter is still winter, but even that holds a strange, stilled beauty. This winter, the town does something new. They decide to build a shrine. Not a shrine. To saints or relics, not even to God, really. It's a modest structure at the edge of the woods, just some carved stones, a little bench, and a weatherproof box for letters. Anonymous notes, messages for the lost, apologies, thanks, or sometimes just drawings of onions. You walk there one morning a little curious, mostly skeptical. A few others are lingering, quiet, respectful. You glance around, then tuck your own scrap of parchment into the box. You don't write anything profound, just a name and a small heart. It feels oddly good. Historians still argue whether post-plague memorials like this, community spaces outside the church, signaled religious fatigue or a broader hunger for personal ritual. Either way, they became surprisingly common, especially in rural areas. You begin visiting the shrine every few weeks, not always to leave something, sometimes just to sit, to listen to the forest, or watch the wind push last year's leaves in, spirals down the path. You start bringing Thomas along. He doesn't really get it. He's more interested in finding bugs under rocks. But he's respectful in his own way. He once left a button shaped like a dog. You suspect he made it up. Over time, the shrine becomes a kind of rhythm in your life. So does the apothecary's monthly herb swap, the weekly open fire supper in the square, the new habit of knocking on doors just to check in. All of it, small, things stitched together, begins to feel like life. Not the life you had before, not the life anyone imagined, but a life. Quirky tidbit. In some towns, plague beads became a post-pandemic trend. Not prayer beads, but tiny tokens strung together, each one symbolizing a day survived or a loved one remembered. They were worn, traded, and sometimes buried with the dead. You begin carving your own, from bits of wood and bone. You don't wear them. You keep them in a pouch under your cloak. Some are plain. One has a crude face. One has a tiny star. They rattle together, softly when you walk. People start telling stories about the plague years now. Half true, half invented. Someone claims they lived alone with 30 cats and taught them to vote on daily meals. Another says they slept through the worst of it entirely. You all know these tales aren't real, but it doesn't matter. You laugh anyway. The real stories, the hard ones, still get shared too. Usually late when the fire's low. When no one's pretending anymore. You tell yours one night. You talk about the moment you almost gave up. The ache that didn't go away for weeks. The strange comfort of peeling apples while the world fell apart. You don't cry. But someone else does. No one rushes to fill the silence afterward. And that's how you know it mattered. Historians tend to skip over this part of plague survival. They focus on structures, economies, migrations. But the day-to-day healing, grief braided with laughter, sorrow soothed by repetition, that's harder to chart. Yet it's the most real thing you've known. You get used to hearing bells again. Not plague bells, not death tolls, real ones. Church bells, smithy hammers, wind chimes someone strung outside their window for no apparent reason. You start to rely on them, subconsciously, marking time by their notes. You find a new rhythm for your days. Wake up, feed the chickens, drink something warm, tend the herbs, walk to the square, maybe visit the shrine, maybe not. And in the evenings, almost without fail, you sit by the fire and talk to someone. Doesn't matter who. The cobbler, a passing monk. Thomas, who's now started trying to write his own songs. They're awful, you love them anyway. Someone's always there, because now you know not to let each other drift too far. That's something the plague taught everyone. Don't wait to ask how someone's doing. Don't assume the bread will bake itself. Don't skip the good parts of the story. The past still lingers, of course, sometimes in dreams, sometimes in smells, occasionally in the way your hand shakes for no clear reason. But you've learned to make space for that too, like a shadow in a familiar room. Present, but not in control. You're not entirely whole. You doubt anyone is, but you're here. You're alive. And the snow falling outside your window is somehow beautiful again. One morning you wake before the sun. The air is cold still, just on the edge of frost. You don't know what woke you. Maybe a bird, maybe a memory. You pull on your warmest layer and step outside barefoot, just for a moment. The sky is that pale violet color. It only gets right before sunrise and there's a hush. Not silence exactly. There's always a faint rustle, an owl still making its way home, something dripping from a roof tile. But it feels like the world is holding its breath. You breathe in with it. The cold stings your lungs, but it feels clean. Real. You go back inside and start a small fire. By the time the sun breaks the horizon, you're already peeling potatoes. You hum without realizing it, a tune you don't recognize. Probably one of Tomas's latest masterpieces. There's a knock at your door. It's the merchant's youngest daughter. She's wearing her father's boots and a cloak far too large, which means she's on a mission. The town council, she says very seriously, wants you to help teach the children. You blink. Teach them what? She shrugs. Stuff. And that's how you become a teacher, not a fancy one. Not with scrolls or classrooms or exams, just you. Sitting under the old sycamore with a group of mismatched little humans trying to explain things like why the moon changes shape, or how bread rises, or what to do when your feelings feel too loud. Historians still debate the extent to which education expanded after the plague, especially in smaller towns, but it's clear that in many places necessity overruled hierarchy. Anyone with knowledge, herbal, practical, spiritual, was pressed into service. You start with small things: how to read numbers, how to recognize edible berries from the ones that make your tongue go numb, how to draw a cat that doesn't look like a haunted goblin. That one takes practice. The kids love it. Well, most of them. There's always one sulker. Yours is named Letty. She thinks everything is dumb. You respect that. Each week, more children show up. Some adults, too. The farmer who never learned to read, the stonemason who wants to better keep accounts, a baker who's curious about the stars. You don't know what you're doing, not really, but you listen. You make space. You tell them the things you wish someone had told you. Like, you're allowed to be sad and still laugh at a fart joke. Or, it's okay to not remember what day it is. One boy, very solemnly, asks what the plague actually was, what it looked like, smelled like, felt like. You pause. Then you tell him the truth. Some of it, anyway. You tell him about the silence. That came first. Then the fear. Then the hard, gray waiting. But you also tell him about the first green shoot you saw after. About the neighbor who shared their last loaf. About the time Thomas wore 2 left shoes for a week and nobody noticed because everyone else was too tired. Quirky tidbit. In some villages, storytelling became a semi-formal practice after the plague, not just for entertainment, but as a way to record memory and maintain morale. Some stories were even coded to hide grief behind metaphors, a storm that stole voices, or a fox with a black cough. You find that teaching is mostly storytelling anyway. You build worlds out of metaphors. The stars are a salt spill across the sky. The lungs are twin bellows in your chest. Kindness is a thread you pass back and forth, tying people together. And, somewhere along the way, you start learning too. You learn patience. You learn that everyone fidgets. That some people only understand numbers if you tell them a story about goats. That you yourself are capable of joy again. Real joy, even in the middle of explaining manure ratios. The shrine, the fire pit, the little lessons under the sycamore. All of it knits your days together. And one afternoon, just as the sun dips low, and the air smells like damp bark and wood smoke, Letty the sulker hands you a drawing. It's crude, lopsided, but it's unmistakably a picture of you holding a big scroll with a speech bubble that says, "Remember to breathe." You ask her if that's what she thinks you say all the time. She rolls her eyes and mutters, "Well, you do." Fair. You smile and fold it carefully, tuck it into your pocket. Maybe it's true. Maybe you do say that too often. But then again, maybe it's worth repeating. Somewhere in the middle of spring, the bells stop sounding like warnings. They still chime at midday, still toll on saints' days, still sing softly when the wind is just right. But that cold knot in your stomach, the one that used to tighten, every time a bell rang, is finally quietly gone. Life hasn't gone back to what it was. It never will. But it has moved forward, and so have you. You hear laughter now from open windows, the sound of sheep being thoroughly unreasonable in the fields. Someone learned to play the lute again, badly, but with conviction. Even Letty smiles. Sometimes one day someone posts a parchment in the square, a notice for the return of the spring games. A town tradition from before the plague, foot races, riddles, and the famously strange cheese wheel toss. At first, people are cautious. Are we ready for this? Is it disrespectful? But the blacksmith's wife says, "We've buried too many years already. Let this one live." So it begins. The whole town gathers in the field just beyond the shrine. Children wear wildflower crowns. The baker brings 3 pies and insists they be judged in a taste duel. The games are a bit chaotic. Someone cheats at the sack race and the cheese ends up in a stream. But no one cares. You haven't seen this many smiles in years. Historians sometimes describe the late plague period as one of quiet restoration, but that phrase misses the music, the bread, the squeaky shoes, the moment Thomas tried juggling eggs and learned why people don't do that indoors. You sit on the grass, next to a young mother who's nursing her baby with one hand and flinging breadcrumbs to the chickens with the other. She says she remembers you from those bleak weeks when everything smelled like vinegar and everyone whispered. "I didn't think we'd make it," she admits. You nod. "Me neither," she grins. "But here we are, and there you are, indeed. Surrounded by people who've each carried something heavy, grief, loneliness, fear, and are still carrying some of it, but differently now. Not alone. Quirky tidbit. Some post-plague festivals incorporated odd rituals like sneeze blessings, where townsfolk would line up to fake sneeze into the crowd while others shouted good wishes. It was part healing, part superstition, and mostly just a reason to laugh. A child tugs your sleeve and hands you a flower. It's mostly stem, barely any bloom, but you thank them like it's a treasure. Because it is. Later, when the sun starts to lower and the shadows grow long, you walk. Past the shrine, someone has added a garland of garlic and roses. There's a note tucked beneath it that says in scrawled ink, "Still here, still grateful." You don't know who wrote it, but it feels right. You decide to sit there a while. Watch the sky turn, lavender and then indigo. Let your shoulders relax. Let your breath deepen. Let your thoughts float. You realize this is what survival looks like. Not triumphant, not tidy, not marked by any single moment, but slow, layered, built from quiet decisions to keep going, to plant something, to tell a joke, to light a candle even when it's windy. You think back to who you were when the plague began, the fear, the fog, the weight of it all. You're not the same person now, and you're glad. And so, as night settles over the town and the last embers of the fire crackle in the distance, you let yourself lean back against the bench. The breeze is soft. The stars are arriving one by one. The world is still fragile, but it's also full of strange, stubborn hope. And you? You're still here. Summer drapes itself lazily over the town, softening the air, thickening the shadows. The plague is a ghost now. Still lurking, still whispered about, still haunting certain doorways, but no longer king. Life, bold and messy, has resumed its reign. One morning you catch your reflection in the well water. You've aged. Not just in lines and grays and the way your joints complain louder than they used to, but in the quiet way your face carries. History now. Joy, loss, mornings like this one. You splash your cheeks with cool water and don't flinch at the image looking back. That day, you walk into town and notice someone has painted flowers on the side of the old grain house. They're crude, bright, possibly tulips, possibly vegetables. No one's quite sure. But they've become something of a landmark. People call it the wall that bloomed after death. You smile at that. People have always used color to defy the dark. Later that week, a rider comes through town. He brings rumors from the coast. Ships returning, trade resuming, talk of new medicines, new understandings of the invisible poisons that swept the land. He says some cities are building hospitals with separate wards just for plagues. Historians still debate how widespread these early hospitals were, or whether they did much good. But the shift in thinking, that disease might have patterns, not just punishments, is undeniable. It's a flicker of something like science. You listen to the writer's tales with a mix of hope and skepticism. Cities always talk like they invented everything. Meanwhile, your neighbor Bertha cured a fever last week with a stew made from moss and sarcasm. Still, it's something. The children you teach begin asking more questions. About stars, about how lungs work, about whether a chicken could, in theory, run a town. You say yes, but only if the town is mostly grain-based. Even the adults begin to lean in more, curious. You start keeping a journal. Not for grand ideas or philosophy, just to remember what the air smelled like today, Who sang during chores? That odd dream, where the moon had a front door and a welcome mat. Quirky tidbit. There's record of a woman in 14th century France who kept a dream ledger after surviving the plague. Most entries were mundane or strange, talking goats, upside-down trees, but occasionally she noted visions of silver breath and a city made of windows. Her writings are now studied by scholars of both history and early psychology. You find yourself doing that too, recording the odd, the small, the quiet textures of living. One entry just reads, "Thomas laughed so hard he fell off the bench. We all pretended not to notice." Another, "Letty drew a picture of me again. I now have enormous eyebrows. Fair." These tiny notes become a kind of scaffolding, not just for memory, but for meaning. At night, the town sleeps more easily. People lock their doors with less dread, dream without interruption, snore without apology. And sometimes, just before you drift off, you hear the gentle sounds of someone humming a lullaby. Maybe a neighbor, maybe a ghost with a decent sense of pitch, maybe yourself. There's peace now, not perfection, not certainty, but peace enough to lie still, to breathe deeply, to trust that tomorrow will come and you'll meet it with open eyes and maybe a list. Because forgetting to soak the beans again would be tragic. You light a candle before bed, not because you're afraid anymore, but because there's beauty in the glow. In choosing light, however small, this is survival too. Not just the living through, but the lighting, the laughing, the leaning in, and you've made it. Somehow, some way, in spite of everything, you've made it. Now, as you lay back, let your thoughts loosen. You've traveled far tonight, not just through muddy fields and smoky kitchens, not just past coughing doorways and under night skies that never promised safety. You've journeyed through the heaviness of survival, the ache of rebuilding, the quiet miracle of choosing joy again. Soften your breath. Let your chest rise, slowly, and fall, even slower. You're safe here. You're warm. The air is still, except for the hush of night sounds. Gentle, unhurried. Somewhere in your mind's eye, a candle flickers on a wooden table. It doesn't need to burn brightly, just enough to remind you you're not in the dark. If your thoughts wander, let them. Let them meander down quiet village paths, over mossy stone walls into kitchens where bread bakes and children giggle and someone sings just off-key enough to make you smile. There's no need to remember everything. Just hold on to this feeling of being carried gently, of being wrapped in calm, of having made it through something hard and finding softness on the other side. No more alarms, no more lists, just this breath and this one. You've done enough today. Let your eyes grow heavier. Let the story fade like fog at dawn. Sleep well, gentle listener.